thing I wanted to sort of shout out or just kind of mention to start the program is book criticism. I actually feel that what I've enjoyed, I always enjoy book criticism because there's no way that I can read all the new books that are coming out. And often, if reviews are good, then it's always great to follow it. And I mean, we have our own book review section, although we're trying to figure out how to do it differently. We just appointed a book review editor, Anakwa Romena, I hope he's listening. So watch out for how we're going to cover books differently, the book industry. We're hoping to have him come on the program actually regularly in the future, but watch out for that. But I want to quickly shout out the two books that there's a book, the reviews that I've liked recently. One is both on this new book about Edward Said. So there's a new book, it's a biography written by Timothy Brennan, who's a former student of Said's. It's called Places of Mind, A Life of Edward Said. And I ordered a copy of this book because the reviews have kind of inspired me to buy copies. But just think quickly, it's about Said, who's in a way was just an incredible, the versatile person. I mean, in summary, a literary theorist, pianist, a music critic, and I think Pankaj Mishra, which is one of these reviewers, sort of refers to him as New York's most famous public intellectual. Susan Sontag. I think he's probably equal to them in being from New York. And then he describes him also as America's most prominent advocate for Palestinian rights. So there are two reviews that I want to single out and I can recommend. Actually, there was a review that appeared in the Wall Street Journal that was really, I mean, the less I say about it, the better. It was just another attempt to kind of go after Said's legacy and besmirch him. And I don't think it succeeded, but it's the kind of thing that's very common when people write about Edward Said, misrepresenting his work for Palestinian liberation. The sort of trite attacks of him as being an anti-Semite, which is, of course, none of that is true. But the two reviews, as I said, that I really like was one is called The Reorientations of Edward Said, and it appeared in the New Yorker, I think April 26th. If you might be able to read it online, by Pankaj Mishra, the Indian critic. And the second one is by Adam Schatz in the London Review of Books. And Adam Schatz's one, I think, is called Palestinianisms. So just quickly on both, Twitter is not always a representative sample, but if you read Twitter, like one of the really good ones that I saw was Chris Lee summarized, and I totally agree with him about Pankaj's review, saying that it's far and away the best review of Tim Brennan's bio of Edward Said. And he himself, he refers to this point of being perplexed by those who have been assigned to review the book and by extension Said's life for the New York Times, but that Pankaj Mishra gets it. And there's a couple of really nice, parts in Pankaj Mishra's review. The reference to the fact that Edward, for example, he only really became politically concerned with the Palestinian. We've always been there, the fact that he was Palestinian, but he had a weird schizophrenic relationship with that part of his identity. But it was after the 6-Day War that he became way more connected to the Palestinian struggle. And there's this line in there, for example, in the review about how he barely engaged with the work of Ralph Ellison or James Baldwin, people that he later would admire when he first got to Columbia in the early 60s. And in fact, he had very little contact with the civil rights movement. And when students protesting the war in Vietnam disrupted a class of his, he actually called campus security. And then I think the other part that I really like from the Pankaj Mishra review is how he writes about Edward Said's writing Orientalism and some of the criticism of Orientalism that came out of the region, particularly by Ijaz Ahmad, and how Edward Said himself wasn't necessarily, Orientalism was a big book, but he didn't think that was the only argument he wanted to make. But in the process, people began to see him only as this writer who writes about, who wrote about, the Orientalist image, if you want, within the West. And then there's other little beautiful things in there that, and I don't want to give away the whole review, but I can recommend that one. And then just quickly, Adam Satz's review in the New Yorker, in the London Review of Books. Some great. There was one tweet I was going to read, but I can't find it now. But Adam's is, I think, 4 times as long as Pankas's, and it includes some little gems like the fact that Edward Said's daughter recommended Sinead O'Connor's music to him, and he became a fan. I know that might surprise some people. And then there's one other sweet one in there, which is something I've always wanted to write about, which is Edward Said's relationship with popular culture, which is that in fact the only thing that Edward Said liked outside of playing classical music was that he liked playing and watching tennis. But that's for another day. In any case, well, what were you been reading?
Well, I haven't really been reading much because, like you, I actually don't enjoy reading. I have to do a lot of it, but it's a lot of work. I think we can just admit that, especially nowadays, it's always exhausting. Especially, I don't like reading Marx. I'm gonna take that up later. But jokes aside, I mean, I just want to touch on something you raised just now, which is about how one of the issues closest to Said's heart and one of the things his advocacy was most pronounced in was his support for the cause of Palestinian liberation. And it is bizarre that he's often portrayed as being this anti-Semite, this narrow nationalist, when the truth is that Said was one of the earliest proponents of a universalist outcome in the struggle. I mean, he wrote that path-breaking essay in 1999 for the New York Times, advocating for the one-state solution and advocating for an outcome that would reimagine the territories of Israel and Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea as being a place that could belong to both Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And it's interesting that at the same time, there's all of this renewed interest in Said's life, thanks to Timothy Brennan's new biography. We're also sort of reaching a kind of impasse in the situation, insofar as, there's been this groundbreaking report released by Human Rights Watch, one of the leading human rights organizations in the world, which declares that Israel is in fact an apartheid state, something we in South Africa have known for a long time, given our own lived experience. And this also follows on from Israel's leading human rights organization as well, B'Tselem, also declaring earlier this year that Israel is an apartheid state. And as I said earlier, South Africans who've lived under a history of racialized segregation, of political oppression, and of near-ethnic cleansing know this very well. So I suppose the question remains of what is going to be the outcome of all of this? What is going to be the outcome of all of these declarations that human rights tragedy continues to be ongoing in Israel and Palestine? I mean, the recent reports are that there's families in East Jerusalem that are on the cusp of being evicted for their homes to make way for a kind of Zionist tourist attraction. So I suppose it's one of those moments when you start to miss a figure like Said, because he had this moral clarity on the issue, this political vision, which I think imagined questioning the nation-state form of Israel, which is the basis of its political project. And ever since the passage of the nation-state law, which spoke about how sovereignty is unique to Jews, it's definitely an opportunity for that nation-state form of social organization to be challenged. But I guess the moment does feel a little bit immobile because the political forces aren't around that are capable of championing such a vision. I mean, the Palestinian elections, which were set to happen this week, have been indefinitely postponed because Abbas's Palestinian Liberation Organization have delayed them yet again. I mean, there's disagreements with the Israeli government over certain terms, but you do get the sense that Palestine, the ruling class in Palestine, comprising Fatah and Hamas, have just reached a point where they're obsolete, where they're completely unable to provide a vision to Palestinians that can actually mobilize a mass movement of the kind that we saw here in South Africa. So yeah, just missing someone like Saeed, who was able to speak with such clarity on the issue.
And I also thought one of the things that I liked that those reviews captured was his ability to, so he had a thing about never feeling at home, and always feeling as an outsider, I think, even in his own intellectual work. But I think the thing that, just to connect to what you're saying now, was his ability to adapt politically, to not sort of remain rigid, but to understand that, you know, the balance of forces politically, and realizing, okay, that tactic doesn't work right now. Like when it was a diplomat, you know, when it was an armed struggle, when it was a diplomatic struggle, like when it was time to seek reapproachment, but, you know, on a sort of equal terms. Like Saeed seemed to be very attuned to that throughout his life, and I think that's another one of those things. When you say, like, there's something often we miss politically now, then you think back on those things. Yeah.